Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today, in which we'll be covering the topic of making the supplier portal and supplier self-service work within an SAP landscape. Now, as many of you will yourselves have found, for businesses that are running SAP Ariba for their purchasing and sourcing activities, and then are using SAP as part of their ERP landscape, there's a number of limitations that need to be overcome in order to drive better business outcomes and create greater value when it comes to working with suppliers via these systems. So in today's session, we're going to split this into two parts. The first part will be presented by JC Bassett, Vice President of Solution Assurance and Enablement here at HICX. With JC's first-hand experience of working to combat these limitations, we'll be able to explore the root causes of some of the issues and therefore illustrate the correct data model, or hopefully the correct data model setup that alleviates these problems. In the second half of the session, we will see how these can be applied to a supplier-centric portal to deliver a best-in-class experience, no matter how complicated the technology landscape is that drives it. For this, we'll join Phil Pandal, our Head of Solution Consulting. You'll see that there is a chat facility available within the webinar platform, so do please feel free to share your comments or questions, and we will respond to all of these individually. The webinar content will be available on demand after today's session. So with that said, let's set the scene and join JC now to start us off.
Thank you, Duncan. Okay, lots to get through. So let's start with SAP. First of all, to understand why we have some of the limitations and challenges that SAP customers frequently encounter, we'll look at an example of a typical SAP landscape, so we can identify what's actually going on. Now, your landscape may comprise of one or more of the solutions as we see on the slide here. So SAP Ariba, SAP Ariba SLP, SAP MDG, and SAP ECC or S/4HANA. And of course, what we don't have represented here, but is very often an additional factor, is that all of this can sit beside other non-SAP ERPs and or other ProcureTech solutions or best-of-breed solutions. But sticking with the SAP landscape for a moment, we've highlighted those areas in which challenges or limitations often arise. Taking the first one, the data as it relates to SAP Ariba and SLP, one of the biggest challenges when working with SAP is that SAP is based on a flat model. If you're not familiar with what that is, it means that every record in SAP is essentially a supplier address or location. And this is because it is oriented around transactions. So you're missing that supplier hierarchy, that view of the supplier as a whole, from the global parent to the domestic parent to each location and so on. This one challenge is responsible for countless projects that go wrong, costing 10 times the budget, taking 10 times as long, simply because the data model is wrong from the very beginning. Next, turning to SLP, number 2 on the chart here, data in this system is limited to global data only. This means no two-way integration to MDG, which in turn means backdoors and manual steps. There's also no feedback loop from a process perspective to go back and forth with a supplier. This limitation has knock-on effects as we go further down the chain. Pain point number 3 is the dreaded duplicate records. SAP Ariba does not govern the duplication of records at the onset. In fact, because of the data model previously described, it is primed to allow suppliers to create duplicate records if they're not associated with the selected address. Duplicate checks and data validations happen much later in MDG, which is far too late in the process. Not only should this be done upfront as suppliers enter their data, but now we are deep into the enterprise architecture, so cleanup and view duplication is much more complex and requires a high degree of manual effort. And finally, if we consider the network experience on Ariba for suppliers, here we will find that suppliers must weed through those duplicates that were created in error, creating a poor supplier experience. Indeed, it was never originally intended as a holistic supplier portal. Therefore, suppliers are not able to self-service and manage their own data. Because the focus remains around the transactional piece, nothing is tailored for the optimal supplier interaction. Okay, so we mentioned just now that the data hierarchy and data model is the single biggest factor in the failure of so many projects. So we'll spend a few moments now to explore that in more detail. We start here with a complex slide, but don't worry about the heavy detail on here just yet, as we will unpack this as we go. The key thing to understand is that we have 4 data stakeholders to consider. Most projects fail to address this and actually focus only on the ERP as the central piece in terms of how they drive their whole data architecture and data model. This is mistake number 1. The system, whether it's an ERP system or a P2P suite, is just one data stakeholder among others. So the ERP system or multiple ERP systems is one data stakeholder. And these all want to look at data in a certain way. SAP, as we discussed, has a very flat view of the world. Oracle is a bit different. Coupa, again, is different. But all of these systems are a stakeholder. In other words, they should not be driving your strategy. Then we have the internal local buying organizations as another stakeholder. What this means is, while you're going to create a central solution, the reality is you have different regions, different business units, different country organizations, and so forth. They're not interested in looking at everything. The team in Germany wants to know what Germany is doing. The team in the US wants to know what the US is doing, and so forth. This gives the internal organization or the local organization stakeholder view. Then we have to consider the supplier. If we want to enable suppliers to do self-service, to manage their own data, we need to address their needs. From a data perspective, they don't care that we're using them across 200 different company codes. They just don't want to have to do things 200 times. In other words, we can't expose our internal complexity to the supplier. If we do that, then we're going to have really poor adoption, and we're going to struggle. So we must consider the supplier as another data stakeholder. And finally, we have the family tree, which caters for the analytical or global organization. What this means is while we have supplier legal entities, we might want to roll IBM UK, IBM Germany, IBM US up into IBM Global. That is also a different view. So it's important to have these definitions of what a supplier is, but also to be making sure that you're addressing the needs of all of your data stakeholders. It's not just centering around the ERP system, which is the incorrect starting place for so many. In order to serve these stakeholders, so much of it boils down to creating the right hierarchy. Success, or the lack thereof, in the project, in terms of integration or having efficient processes, is driven by the correct hierarchy. To be successful, you need a hierarchy that can feed all different systems. Looking at the chart here, what you'll notice is that different transactional systems or other solutions have a need for the supplier data, but those needs are not always the same. What we need to do is create a best practice view in which we know is battle tested and will work across any situation now and in the future. In other words, a model that fits into every single scenario. Let's illustrate that now to show why it drives integration and process success. Imagine, for instance, you just had SAP's flat structure, but you want to run a business process at a global ultimate level, which is a very real scenario. For example, you may want to run sustainability in EcoVadis, and to do that efficiently, run this at the parent company level. But if we only have legal entity, then we can't automatically do that. On the other hand, if we're doing something like quality, then we need to go down to the manufacturing level because we have to assess from where we are receiving the goods. A transactional system that has just the invoicing and ordering locations may not help us here. Now, what this leads to later on is when you want to go after supplier collaboration and those other use cases, is that we now have the foundation needed to do that. For example, with our supplier hierarchy in place, We can bring in a common identifier for suppliers across all different systems. And we know that supplier X is this ID in this system and this ID in this other system. Very easily, you can bring in the transactional data, corrective actions, specification changes, certifications, orders, contracts, whatever it is, and reconcile all the information. That becomes really easy because you've established how all these things connect. It also allows you to swap out systems as needed without disruption to the business. So foundation is key. Then you can implement quick, easy wins over time to drive more use cases with suppliers.
Thank you, JC, for all of your valuable insights there. Now, JC ended on the point that once you have the correct data model, the correct data hierarchy in place, it opens up the opportunity to address use cases that were previously impossible. One of those is central task management for suppliers, because often those tasks or activities that we want the supplier to undertake sit within different workflows, often fragmented across systems with little transparency or visibility due to the data requirements in each of those systems being different. So how can we give suppliers the best chance of completing those tasks in the quickest amount of time? Put simply, we must be able to show all supplier tasks from all different systems, all those connected systems, in one place. That includes master data update tasks, for example. And that's when the supplier data hierarchy to drive these activities at the right level and across the right systems becomes very powerful. And with the centralized ID for suppliers that JC also just mentioned, it's now possible to compile a list of the tasks, the workflows, the initiatives, or whatever else the supplier is in the process of doing. And this can now easily be compiled in a familiar newsfeed format, for example, leading them directly to the systems or services needed to complete the task in one click. So suppliers no longer need to worry about what system they need to log into to complete any pending tasks that may be in the stack. Meanwhile, on the enterprise, on the business side, the data can be collected and assimilated and then relayed to the correct systems in exactly the format they require. So that's the context. But now let's see how Supplier Portal and Supplier Self-Service can be brought to life, which then in combination with the data model enhancements can be used to really drive better engagement with our suppliers. So Phil, what does the ideal self-service enabled Supplier Portal actually look like? Phil, it's over to you.
Hi, thanks, Duncan. So thanks, everyone. My name's Phil. I'm part of the Solution Consulting team. Very happy to be here and appreciate your time. As part of the solution demonstration, as Dunk said, what we're going to look at is how we remove three key complexities that we often see. So the first one being low adoption, the second one is poor or low engagement, and the third one being slow or inaccurate communication. For the first use case, I'm going to look at adoption. I'm going to take the persona of James, and James is a key contact for Acme, and he's one of your tier 1 suppliers. So James has had previous experience and pain with multiple portals, multiple solutions that he's had to log into, and so he's suffering from portal fatigue, and that's resulted in him avoiding logging in, and for your organization it's resulted in low adoption rates. So the HICX Experience Portal is a unified intelligent portal that provides a segmented one-to-one approach to the relationship that you want to build with your suppliers. The portal's set up by your stakeholders using our low and no code approach. So as James, I've entered the portal, and as we can see, he's got a tailored and specific landing page. So some of the key ways that we remove barriers to adoption are by ensuring a one-to-one segmented approach for your suppliers and your individual supplier personas. So what this means is that your suppliers see what they need based on their segmentation. So no more generic forms, generic systems, generic tasks, or generic actions. Anything James needs is directly available within his pending tasks. As part of onboarding or enablement, James has realized that he does not need to sign into multiple platforms and systems to key in his data and information. We have consolidated the tasks and actions from the multiple best-of-breed systems that exist in your technology landscape. And from here, James can seamlessly navigate through your processes and workflow without needing to access multiple emails and multiple systems. What we've enabled for James is a supplier-specific chatbot, and this supports the onboarding process. It allows James to ask and you to answer any queries or questions that he has. So, for example, if he wants to raise a query asking how he can raise a support ticket, he can do that directly from his chatbot on his landing page. Other ways that remove barriers to adoptions are by adding videos, news, and content that are all going to help support his onboarding journey and the ongoing relationship that he has with your organization. James has the ability to provide and enrich the data associated with these tasks in one single console. So he can request to update, extend, or amend his locations, his contacts, addresses, bank accounts, and in fact, certification and other documents that he's required to provide to you as part of that relationship. The intake and business process orchestration that HICX provides supports processes such as onboarding, extensions, and amendments, all of which can be managed from his single supplier portal. So in summary, we provide a one-to-one tailored and specific approach for James. James has reduced his, and in fact your costs of adoption by removing delays in onboarding and by improving efficiency. And as you can expect, we've reduced onboarding times, ensuring full compliance with your business and regulative initiatives, as well as providing you with full auditability, transparency, visibility, and allowed you to make strategic decisions. For the second use case, I'm going to keep as James, but we're going to look at how HICX supports and removes the barrier of a low supplier engagement. If I move back into the supplier portal as James, via our dashboard and our low-code tabs, we provide James with a single pane for him to engage with your organization. This single view is not just for the relationship with you, but also with the technologies that you want James to access as part of that relationship. So a common challenge that James has had previously with engaging is that he's had to log into multiple portals and solutions. With HICX, he can access those directly from his homepage, and via single sign-on can access those best-of-breed solutions. Via low-code, what we've done is created a carbon tab here. Now, how this helps James engage is that now he has a specific area within his single supplier portal where we have data pulled in from one of our third-party partners, Ditch Carbon, and now James can see the specific actions which he needs to take to reduce his carbon footprint. Another common challenge with engagement is where James has previously struggled to engage with your AP around invoices, for example. But now he can find information directly within his invoice tab. At HICX, we're not a P2P system, but what we're doing is presenting data from your best-of-breed systems in this single supplier portal. He can engage with AP on queries, or he can request to amend his invoices. He can easily see and filter invoices by status. He can access the invoice directly, and he can find reasons that his invoices were rejected. Another example is where you wish to share risk and/or performance data. So previously, James has struggled to engage in understanding your view of the risk that his organization has. So here he can view the risk, and he can then take specific actions directly within his tasks or actions tab and ensure that he reduces the risk and provides you with confidence when working with his organization. So we provide that single engagement platform, consolidating data from your technology landscape and present it to James in a single pane of glass. The final common pain that we see, or the challenge that we need to overcome, is that with communication. So James has previously struggled to know who to communicate with, who to collaborate with, and how to do this. So what your organization has done, using low code, has created a help center tab, and you provided James with access to ask queries, raise questions, issues, concerns, complaints, or improvement plans directly with the contacts that you make available to James. So on a one-to-one basis, he can communicate with the relevant stakeholders within your organization. You've decided to share documents, policies, videos, any targeted content to support James in communicating with your relevant stakeholders. You've also added a collaboration tab. Now James can collaborate through our business process orchestration solution directly with the relevant stakeholders within your organization that manage his relationship. James can see targeted messages based on his segmentation or just his relationship with your stakeholders. He can view and access those and also go back and collaborate with your stakeholders. The outcome is that we've removed the friction points in collaborating with your suppliers and remove those friction points from James and the team within his organization. So we can provide you with the comfort that you have a compliant supply chain who's open to innovate with your organization. So in summary, the HICX Supplier Experience Portal is a unified intelligent platform and portal providing a segmented one-to-one approach to remove the adoption friction and increase onboarding and master data cycle times, increase effective and efficient engagement, and enhance collaboration and innovation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Phil, for taking us through that. All right, before we close the webinar, we will just bring together all of these points, and to wrap it up for us, I'll hand over to JC.
Okay, now just to summarize. We'll end on these key points of value to you as a business. First, you benefit from a singular entry point for data, meaning efficiency and time savings. It means synchronized data across systems from one source of truth. This increases trust in the data and reduces data silos across the business, thereby increasing visibility and transparency critical to maintaining control and mitigating risk. There's no need to adapt workflows and processes to suit the requirements of each individual system. You can ensure smooth operational workflows and information sharing, again, reducing delays and inefficiencies. And by unlocking true supplier self-service, it means suppliers can maintain their own data, including compliance certifications, contact details, bank account data, but always in accordance with your governance rules. The peace of mind that everything is up to date and accurate for the business.
Thank you, JC, for that final summary. And indeed, thank you to both our speakers today and to everyone who took the time to join us for this session. We hope you found it useful, and we're certainly looking forward to continuing the conversation with you. Thanks for watching, and have a great rest of day.